Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to Cancerous Comment Conduct. More or less every single comment response video that you've ever come across. However, this is quite possibly the first ever episode in which this is actually going to be a tame one. Because truth be told, my top 10 underrated Marvel villains has got quite a lot of interesting comments and not a lot of them are actually negative. And so I want to try something a little different and talk about each and every comment, as to which people give me their own list on underrated villains and kinda reflect on that. I do have a few cancerous comments, so you know, I'll make it worthwhile. So without further ado, let's begin. Now the first comment, courtesy of Howard the Quack, is number 1 should be Pastepot Pete, or some of you might know him as the Trapster. Now from what I can understand about this character, isn't the Trapster already meant to be like Kite Man levels of lame? As far as I'm aware, Pastepot Pete is meant to be one of these villains who are created to be lame and hasn't achieved anything outside of being a consistent member of the Frightful Four. So I don't really consider him being underrated per se, considering that Pastepot Pete is meant to be a choke film to begin with. Now here we have our first proper list, courtesy of England is My God Church. And in no particular order, Magus is the first one he mentioned. Now as far as I can understand, Magus is the evil doppelganger of Adam Warlock. Or in some versions he's like some sort of evil split personality. And from what I can understand, Adam Warlock is a fairly powerful character in his own right, what with possessing cosmic powers as well as even being a powerful sorcerer. And you know, I think Magus is a fairly interesting villain despite my lack of knowledge. And I do believe that Magus is a very powerful villain in the cosmic side of Marvel. Now the next villain he has mentioned is of course Madame Mask. Now again, I'm not going to pretend that I know too much on Madame Mask outside the fact that she is Tony Stark's ex, as well as being an extremely trained assassin, but in terms of Iron Man's lackluster rogues gallery, Madame Mask appears to be one of these higher ups in Iron Man's rogues gallery. And given the fact that Tony Stark is a womanizer in his own right, I believe that Madame Mask does make her a somewhat interesting antagonist from the lack of knowledge that I know of her. And next on his list is Mr. Fear, who as far as I'm aware is pretty much Marvel's equivalent of the Scarecrow, with the fashion style of the Phantasm. And again, I don't have much to say because I have next to no knowledge in terms of this villain. And then following up, we have Blackheart, who was already pretty high on my list. And then we also have Lady Deathstrike. Now yes, Lady Deathstrike does look really kick-ass and she does have that little rivalry with Logan, but to me Lady Deathstrike doesn't really appeal to me all that much. Not like I dislike her by any stretch, but I feel like she's more of a background villain. And then we also have the UFOs who, I guess. And then we have Reverend Ashebe. Probably butchered the fuck out of that name, and if you are a member of Black Panther's Rogues Gallery, then you're bound to be overrated as fuck. And then we also have Whirlwind, who, again, yeah, I can kinda see him being underrated. And then Annihilus, I agree, he was on my list. Baron Zemo, I don't think he's so much underrated, but more underutilized. Although that's kinda about to change. There's also Curse, who, again, he was on my list. Shumagorath, which is actually a really interesting choice. I mean, sure, his appearance isn't all that appealing, however, he is incredibly powerful. Almost in the same league as Dormammu in that respect. And I feel like I would love to see Shumagorath in the MCU at some point, preferably in the next Doctor Strange film. Because it would be pretty interesting to see what Shumagorath could bring to the table. And then we also have Mysterio, who I don't really believe is underrated, if anything. And then the Hellfire Club, who I'm sorry, but they're just boring assholes. I mean, outside of the Dark Phoenix saga, what are they really known for? I mean, if anything, the Hellfire Club just sit on ass being posh wankers. And sure, they have their moments here and there as individuals, but as a group, not so much. And then finally he mentioned the Hood, and again he was at number 2 on my list, as to which I 100% agree with. Now the next one comes from Tevye. Good list. Now as for me, I think my most favourite underrated villain is Hobgoblin, aka Kingsley, because unlike the Green Goblin, who is Spider-Man's arch nemesis, Hobgoblin in my opinion is actually way more interesting villain for Spider-Man to face. And plus, because of Kingsley's intelligence, he was able to outsmart even Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man himself, by keeping his identity a secret, which was really cool in my opinion. Now I will admit that the mystery of the Hobgoblin's identity is really interesting, and it was pretty cool that it lasted so long. But when you really take that away, what do you have then? You have more or less the Green Goblin, just with a slightly different look, and his sanity still remains intact. And when you really think about it, there's not much difference between the Green Goblin and the Hobgoblin. And at least with Venom and Carnage, there are plenty of differences between the two, both physically as well as their personalities. Now this next list comes from SK69, with number 10 being Count Nefaria, to which he comments, at least redesign his costume maybe? And in terms of costume, I completely agree with, because he looks absolutely ridiculous. And as far as I can understand on Count Nefaria, he's more or less an evil Wonder Man, in terms of his powers at least, and is also a crime boss who gained powers. If you ask me, that's kinda boring. And then number 9 being Madcap, to which he comments, can't have Avengers fighting Deadpool, use Madcap, he is more or less a villain version. And lately Madcap seems to be getting more popularity thanks to Deadpool ironically. So underrated? I don't think so. Number 8, Spot, very interesting power, don't understand why he isn't taken seriously. And that I completely agree with. I mean, if you really think about it, Spot's powers are actually really creative. It's a shame that he's underused in the comics though. Number 7, UFOs. Again, I can kinda see, why not? Number 6, Nitro. And considering that he is pretty much the catalyst for Civil War in the comics, he has every right to be on this list. Number 5, Scorpion. Personally, I don't believe that he's so underrated, but rather underutilized. Number 4, Moonstone. Now again, I'm not going to talk like I know the ins and outs of Moonstone, however I do believe that she is a rather interesting villain. What with her background of being a psychiatrist, as well as manipulating people for her own needs. And I also like how she is pretty much a clone of Miss Marvel, but at the same time has her own power set. And to top it all off, her costume is rather interesting, specifically the one that we're looking at right now. Number 2, Mr. Fear. I don't know too much about him like I previously mentioned. And number 1, Madman. Again, I don't know too much about Madman, so I can't really say anything. Honorable mentions, Spy Beast, don't know him. Shriek, I guess. Titanium Man, he was on my list. Swarm is actually pretty kick-ass. I mean, take away the obvious weakness, he's a pretty cool villain. Despite him being minor and all. Hydro Man doesn't appeal to me. And Super Adaptoid, not really a villain, but a threat nonetheless. And a pretty big threat at that. What about the Mandarin, Iron Man's arch nemesis? He most certainly doesn't get enough recognition. Wanna know why the Mandarin doesn't get much recognition? Because the Mandarin is a terrible villain. Now if the Mandarin was more of a side villain, then I could get behind him, but the fact that he's Iron Man's arch nemesis just makes him all the more pathetic. And really, he's just a bland asshole with powerful rings. Now let me ask you guys this question. What makes the Mandarin Iron Man's arch nemesis? Exactly! I mean, you can point on what makes Batman and the Joker tick. Batman is the agent of justice, while the Joker is the agent of chaos. And plus the Joker has pulled off some personal shit towards Batman over the years. And you can also kinda say the same thing about Professor X and Magneto. They have very similar goals in that mutants deserve peace, however one believes that they should make peace with the humans, while the other believes that the mutants have every right to dominate the humans. And when you think of a Spider-Man arch nemesis, none could remotely top the Green Goblin. He killed Spider-Man's former love Gwen Stacy, and not only that, was also behind the entire Clone Saga. Now look back at Iron Man versus the Mandarin. I mean, what makes them remotely clash, outside of the fact that one's good, one's evil? Now the closest thing that I can think of is the fact that one represents technology while the other represents magic. But this gets completely tossed out of the window anyway, because the Mandarin's rings aren't even magical. And I would go as far as to say that Iron Man 3 was the best thing to ever happen to the Mandarin. There, I said it. The Mandarin completely sucks balls. Fuck the Mandarin. And you wanna know who would make an even better arch nemesis for Iron Man? Dr. Doom! Chitaun is hugely underrated given his vast influence. And to that I 100% agree with you on that one. Because not only is this villain completely powerful, but he's also responsible for creating the Darkhold. And has also possessed both Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver before. And I believe that he was the one who was mind controlling Scarlet Witch during the Avengers Disassembled event. Although I'm not 100% sure on this one, please correct me if I'm wrong. But either way, he is incredibly underrated. What kind of accent is this? Well, my accent? The British accent? The Scouse accent? The human accent? The Lord's Legion accent? Yeah, mine is Devil Dinosaur. Wait, isn't Devil Dinosaur a hero? Because as far as I'm aware, he's always been a hero. Unless in his early appearances he was a villain, in which case I wouldn't even be surprised. Number 1, Mr. Sinister. I agree with, he was on my list. Number 2, Hobgoblin. Not really my cup of tea. Number 3, Lady Death. And who even is this Lady Death? You mean this Lady Death? I mean, she's not Marvel, mate. Or are you talking about Mistress Death? Because you clearly forgot about the Mistress. Or by Lady Death you mean Lady Deathstrike? Cause I don't know, I'm confused. Number 4, Vulcan. Who is the third Miss and Summer's brother. And outside of that fact, as well as him being insanely powerful, I have no idea who he is. Number 5, Nitro. I can kinda see that. Number 6, Toxin. Toxin's not even a villain. Unless you're talking about Eddie Brock's version of Toxin, and even then he only fought against Agent Venom once and then that was that. Number 7, Asylum. I don't know who he is, or who she is. Number 8, Blackout. I can kinda see that one. Number 9, Atuma. I can totally dig this one. And number 10, Zola, who I don't really think is that underrated. And finally, you pronounce Seta wrong. You see, the thing is, I've heard this name through a number of ways. Some people say Seta, some people say Sator, some people say Sortor, some people probably even call Mephisto. And according to Google Translate, you pronounce Seta as Sator. And personally, Sator sounds badass. And that's why I pronounce Sator as Sator. And I'm not gonna change that. So yeah, this is pretty much the end of this episode, and like I said earlier, this is a very tame episode. I wanted to try something completely different, and I think with a bunch of comments from the underrated Marvel villains and a bunch of villains that have been name dropped, I feel like that I wanted to reflect on some of them. And looking back, this kinda inspires me to do maybe a part 2 on that list, given that there are a bunch of interesting villains that I've never thought about the first time around. And maybe the next episode on Cancerous Comment Conduct will be back to basics. But either way, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.